So a few weeks ago, I set out to build an ultralight plane, not really intending it to have any purpose or use for testing, but because I've gotten pretty obsessed with ultralight plane models and wanted for the longest time to build one for myself. Now if you watch part 1 and part 2 of this plane, you could see this plane looked like crap and flew like crap. Not that I necessarily rushed it per se, but because I skipped a pretty important part while making this plane from scratch, and that was planning. So making things up along the way, it looked really goofy and the proportions were really messed up, and my thrust angle wasn't correct, leading to some really terrible handling characteristics. And with the crash, I set it aside for about a week or two until it was snowing once again, so I wasn't able to continue my gyrocopter project. Since I'm going to be building a new plane, I stripped off all the parts except for the wings because they were still in pretty decent shape, and I plan to use them again for this new design. So for my new model, I hopped into Onshape and quickly designed this aircraft. Now as you can tell, I went for a basic polar instead of a pusher, mainly because I didn't want to mess around with the thrust angle and vertical CG, which was a big reason why the other one couldn't fly that well. And this new plane won't have any 3D printed parts unless I need something for the wheels or wing struts, but other than that, it should be mostly regular foam board. Now as for my reference, I tried to mix the look of a Cub and a Zenith into one while still trying to keep the ultralight plane feel, but there's really nothing special going on in terms of looks. And if this plane does work out, I'll be using it for experiments and testing, which is the main reason why I kept it pretty simple. Now on to the build. So going back to the wings I used previously, I rounded the edges and also made the areas of the wing that were under cambered slightly larger to hopefully reduce the overall weight of these wings. And because they're going to be flat instead of having a dihedral, the overall wingspan was definitely over exaggerated and didn't need to be this long, so I cut some portions off of the wing, avoiding the servo wires I already put in. Now if I could go back, I would definitely remake the wings, specifically the airfoil. Not that the airfoil is necessarily bad per se, but because I wanted to make an ultralight with a high lift to drag ratio aspect. As you can tell, I wasn't following any design when creating these wings, which is why it looks pretty wonky. Probably should have went for something like this, which is what you commonly see on STOL aircraft. After finishing up the wings, I went on to make the tail boom / tail area, which I made sure was much longer than the previous tail. So I don't think this is this bad for just kind of trying to guess what it's going to look like. Could have been slightly steeper, but at the same time, I do want to make this slightly short so then the propeller I have can actually, push air through the airplane. So I think here, I'm not going to glue this up yet. I'm just going to attach my servos and make the bigger tail. I need to remake the tail because my original one is definitely way too small. And then from there, figure out how I'm going to attach it to the main body. I think this is pretty good. It's pretty good. After that, I added some holes in the tail to put in the new servos. I just took them off from the old plane. Then after that, I added some supports in the middle just to give the tail a little more structure. And it's now looking pretty good. And when making the tail, I ran into an issue I never really thought about before, and it was that this maker foam I got from Flight Test, once shipped to me, was warped. So the foam you see here is like really badly warped, so I tried everything to just get it flat. It was winter right now, so I couldn't really just set it out in the sun to let it flatten out, hopefully. So I just tried to use a heat gun, a hair dryer, or just let it lay flat for a couple days, but nothing was really working. Because my tail boom and both of my wings are made out of the same foam, it resulted in a pretty big issue, as you'll see later. And because the foam wasn't flattening out, I just resorted to use some Dollar Tree foam, which actually worked out quite well. It was just a little hard to cut. And with that, I finished up the horizontal stabilizer and vertical stabilizer, so pretty much the tail is basically done. And then to make it easy so then I can take off these wings to put it in the car so I can take it out to the field, I just used this sort of balsa / basswood sort of plank or stick or whatever, and this actually slid through the wings quite well, so I was able to put that through to hold the wings together. After that, I went ahead to connect all the control surfaces just to make sure everything was working, and I ran into an issue I kind of had before, which was where these servos were kind of glitching whenever I would control it. Not like jittering, but sort of just like kind of glitching in the movement, and I'm not too sure why. My initial thought was because there wasn't enough voltage, but this battery was like full charge. I'm using a 2200 milliamp battery, so it should be plenty enough voltage to power these servos, so not exactly sure what's going on there. And for my motor and speed controller, I'm going to be using a 40 milliamp speed controller. For my battery, I'm using a A2212/5T 2450 kV motor. So this should be plenty of power to get this plane off the ground. So with kind of finishing this entire body, it's looking pretty good. I'm pretty proud with how it turned out. There is one thing that I realized is going to be pretty big issue. I didn't realize before. These wings, one of the wings is actually warped a little bit. If I were to compare the angle of attack at the tips relative to the table, see, this one's slightly positive. It's a little bit negative. So, yeah, that's something probably should have realized before. I really don't know what to do, but everything else is fine. Control surfaces work fine. Much more proud of how this looks so far. After that, I just have to make my nose, fit the battery, everything else in with the motor. It should be good, and then also make the landing gear. For my landing gear, since I couldn't really find the correct size online, I just decided to make some myself. So I just used a 1/16" aluminum flat bar, bent it into the shape I wanted, drilled some holes, put the wheels in, and put it on the plane. So it's pretty simple. I think looking back, I really don't know how hard of a landing this plane will take, considering the fact that I will be landing it like on some grass. I don't know exactly how much force this landing gear can take, mainly because aluminum is pretty thin. I think I should have done it with a thicker flat bar, and also should have made the base where it was connected to the body a wood base instead of foam, because this foam is really not that strong. I had to like find another way to glue it on to keep it more secure. So yeah, that's a little sketchy right now, but probably just gonna have to fix it later. Okay, testing everything out. So the thing is that this controller does have 10 channels in total, but the receiver I have is only a 6-channel receiver. So I decided, hold on, let me just make sure. Yeah, 6-channel receiver. I decided, because my original idea was to have a sort of, I don't know, a front wheel here, and then that would be a slave of the rudder, and it would be 100%, so this would be doing the same thing as that. Because of how big this plane is, and also because it's probably not going to need too long to take off, I think I'm just going to have just three fixed wheels. So the front wheel is not going to be doing much. It'll just be controlled by the rudder on the ground. So hopefully that works. That's really the simplest way to do it. This plane isn't really meant to be this so complicated. I just kind of wanted to sort of fly, and I have some interesting ideas I want for it. But now I'm just going to make the nose, and I'll keep it about the same, like this one. About the same as this one, a little smaller though, because I think this nose should have fits the style of this plane. So I made the nose, nothing much going on, it looks pretty simple, but I did make a battery box, so where the battery and the motor were connected to could slide out. I do know with how powerful this motor is, it will need some thrust angle, either to the right or left. Don't exactly know yet, but also need a negative thrust angle. For now, I'm just going to keep it pretty neutral. I don't think it should bring down the plane if it's not correct, but I did make it so it could slide out, so I can change it anyway. So, but I'm not going to do any changes for right now. All right, put everything together. So it's looking pretty good. My plugging in situation is kind of weird because the charging port's all the way out here, so if I want to unplug, I have to pull this out. Not the most convenient. I'm probably going to have to create another opening here, which should fix that issue. But for now, I think it's fine. Issue I discovered is that my servos are... This one's fine. It's doing that thing where it's like kind of glitching. Well, not as much anymore, but sometimes it's glitching. That's going to be a bit of a problem when I'm flying. If it's like glitching at all, I don't think that's going to be good. So yeah, this motor's looking good. This is the propeller I had. I have to... It doesn't really fit this motor size, motor shaft, so I'm gonna have to drill a hole here so it can actually sort of fit on. But this is a pretty good size propeller for this plane. Yeah, it's pretty good. So after that, I can finish up the bottom of this, add the front wheel, and we should be good to go. Alright, so I put this on. I'm pretty confident with how secure this is. It's pretty well put together. I'm just a little worried with if this thing will go straight, but flipping it over, putting it on. Yeah, level's good, height's good. It looks really good. I think it's probably my favorite airplane I ever made so far. Actually, it seems to be fine. I was a little worried with this wheel because you can tell this is much farther forward, so kind of interesting how it's just going straight. But I think it's pretty good. It's looking really good. Need to test the CG again because I did add a little more weight in the front. But right now, really liking it so far. Just hopefully it doesn't crash and that I can also fly. Okay, so I've been doing some CG testing. I moved the battery further back. As you can tell, I put something there, so now the battery's further back. So my CG didn't really move at all. It's like about here somewhere, which is a little further forward than I want it to, but I think it should be fine. Honestly, I need to just do some testing just to figure out some minor adjustments I need to make. So I'm just gonna keep it like this for now, and hopefully in my next video I'll be doing some testing for this. But if it does fly well, which I'm hoping it doesn't crash, I'm gonna be reinforcing a lot of the parts here because I do want to use this plane for some other tasks. Yeah, that's pretty much it for this build video. I didn't want to make it too long a video because it's not that much going on. I'm just building this plane. But I didn't want to leave it here before I test it because I do want you guys to give me some suggestions on any minor details that I might have missed that might affect its flying, because I really don't want this thing to crash. I don't want to remake it again. But yeah, I'm going to leave it off here and hopefully it flies in the next video.